Thank you. So I'll begin to make an introduction about the history of the camp, and afterwards I will talk about the memory of the place. So on 27 July 42, the Nazis opened the SS assembly camp for Jews located in the Dossin Barracks in Mechelen, in Belgium. Mechelen is settled halfway from Brussels and Antwerp, where most of the Jewish population was living. About the first period of the camp, we do not know so much, only that in May 40, the German took the war prisoner to the Dossin Barracks. It was then for some weeks a prisoner camp for prisoner of war, and afterwards they will be sent to other prisons. Those are two of the few pictures we have found about the first period of the camp. Then at the end of 40, it seems that the camp was empty and no more used by the Nazis. From the 4th of July 42 to the 31 of July 44, about 25,000 Jews and 350 Sinti and Roma were deported from the SS assembly camp settled in Dossin. They were coming from Belgium and north of France, and they were deported mainly to Auschwitz and Birkenau. Alors, as Drancy or Westerbork, the sole function of this place consists of gathering Jewish deportees for the genocidal deportation. In 45, only 5%, less than 5% of those victims have survived. Here you are looking at a document, one of the few German original documents we have found about the setting up of the SS assembly camp. So the Militärbefehl für Belgien und Nordfrankreich left the place over to the SIPO-SD, Sicherheitsdienst, Sicherheitspolizei, under the order of the SS Major Schmidt. Philip Schmidt was already the head of the camp of Brendonk, which is more famous than the Dossin Barracks, because this camp entered the history as a terror camp. This is one of the first pictures taken at the moment the assembly camp was installed. So this is maybe the first day of functioning of the camp. So we saw that the kitchen, the Aufnahme, the registration bureau was not yet installed, and everything was done on the courtyard. There is a difference between the Dossin Barracks and Westerbork or Drancy, because this camp was created by the SIPO-SD just a few days before the departure of the first transport. The order was given at the end of June, and the transit camp opened its door at the end of July. Westerbork and Drancy existed already before the beginning of the final solution. In these places, people were already interned, detained for different reasons. Refugees coming from Germany, people who had fight during the civil war in Spain and so on. It's amazing to remark that unlike the fact that so much people were deported from the Dossin barracks, the history of this camp was widely unwritten and not so well known. The shape of Braindonk was too huge, and in Belgium we have suffered from a lack of comprehension about what the Shoah was. I take a lot of several sources, but I won't talk about that now, but I collected pictures, photographs, testimonies made during the trials of the German from 44 to 51, testimonies which did not yet been subjected to the many distortion of memories. It is also a way to read the words of the Nazis, because most of them didn't speak later publicly about their activities in the camp. There are only a few German SS who are working at the camp. 12 persons were enough to rule the place. The first commandant was Philip Schmidt. You see him here near his car in the courtyard of Dossin. And the second one was the commandant Johannes Gerhard Frank. The other SS, Rudolf Steckmann, was the commandant at interim, and Max Boden was the responsible for the registration. We have also identified during all the period of existence of the camp 80 Flemish SS who were working there as auxiliaries. Alors, at the Aufnahme, people were coming and were registered on the deportation list. They also received their identification plate that they had to wear around their neck. This gave them their new identity. So in Roman numbers, the number of the transport, and in Arabian numbers, the place they took on the deportation list, but also the place they will have into the dormitories, and also the place they will have when embarking on the train. The living conditions were quite rude. The first picture above shows the barracks as a military place. So for the privileged detainees, people who are working in the camp, Jewish detainees who are working in the kitchen, who are registering the detainees on the deportation lists, people who were also cleaning the camp and so on, were living in better condition than the others. So those rooms are for the administrative or staff or workers. Here you see a picture of a dormitory for transport Jude. So Jewish people who were immediately registered on the deportation list. Women, kids, men from all ages were put together into those dormitories without any beds, on a straw mattress, and they had to sleep there. Sometime when the camp was there was too much population into the camp, people were also lying and sleeping in the halls of the barracks. The hunger was always present in the SS assembly camp, so there was only two ways to avoid to suffer too much from the hunger. The first one was to ask people who were still living outside and free for packs with food. And since the month of April 43, the German commander Frank allowed a charity organization to deliver small food rations for Jewish people. And here you can see what was the food ration. So quite a few potatoes, a little bit butter, some vegetables, mainly coal. And the SS reigned in the camp with the arbitrariness, violence, and this situation was reinforced by the impunity from which the SS guards benefit. So there are a lot of mistreatment, violence, atrocities, and abuses. And some of those abuses were photographed by the SS. So here you see before the departure of the 8th transport on 8 September 42, after a great raid in Brussels, Jewish religious people were humiliated before embarking on the transport. There is a lot of mistreatment, but it's important to emphasize that there is a really low number of deceased of the inmates which occurred in the SS assembly camp. For more than 27,000 people who went and who passed through the camp, only 57 cases of death are recorded, and most of them were due to normal disease, illness, like cancer or heart disease. Only one people died at the assembly camp after mistreatment, and this is Bernard van der Ram. You see his picture here. He died on 5 of April 43 after having been controlled for having dirty feet. But it was impossible at the Dossin barracks to keep a basic hygiene. People also tried to resist. There was never an organized network of resistance into the camp, but little daily actions by several detainees. The people who were for a long time in the camp were most able to resist than the other, because they knew how the camp was working. They had a relation with other people who were also working at the camp administration or by the Gepäckträger, so the people who were who must take care of all the luggages and the baggages of the newcomers. They also were in charge of putting the straw on the wagons before departure, and in this straw they try and they could put hide some tools to help people to escape. Alors, the camp was not liberated. Just during the night of the 3rd to the 4th of September 44, amid the general upheaval, the SS Sammellager was abandoned by the SS. They flew away and left some 550 Jews in the camp. So those people who were still interned in the camp get no interest from the outside. There was no army who was coming at the camp to set them free. There was no care from the Jewish population who was still alive. And it's only 3 or 4 days later, that resistance organization, Comité de défense des Juifs, so Committee for the Defense of the Jews, sent some representative with money and with the aim of helping the survivors who were not deported to go back to Antwerp or Brussels. The liberation was not a great jubilation for the detainees, because they realized quickly how huge the devastation was. The Judeo-site left almost no family untouched by the 2 years of deportation. And we are at our museum, we are trying to make the history of each of these transports, but also making the history of each person who was on the deportation list. So one of the most important places in our museum is the Remembrance Wall. We have a huge wall which takes 4 floors, and on those on this wall were all portraits of the deportees shown. The people who were repatriated, who has survived, were colored in another color than those who perished. Nobody is forgotten. So we try to get a place, as the people were registered on the deportation list, on the wall. If we do not have the picture of or the portrait of the person, we are using little silhouettes for women, men, kids, and babies. So this allows us to collect each year new portraits and to add them on the wall, because this is maybe the most impacting place of our museum on a pedagogical view, because when we speak about 20,000 people, it's only numbers. It's quite difficult for the visitors or the pupils, the students, to realize about how much people that is. But when people came into the museum and they saw those huge wall with pictures on this dimension on the wall, it tells a lot. The Dossin Barracks was really the antechamber of death. We know that 62% of all the deportees, mostly women and kids or elderly, were immediately murdered in the gas chamber of the killing center of Birkenau. They never entered the concentrationary complex of Auschwitz. Only 38% of the deportees from Belgium were considered as strong enough to work and were tattooed and used for the slave labor into Auschwitz concentration camps and commandos. Out of this group of 9,000 people, only 1,250 survived after the war. This is what we call a statistical noise. It's quite insignificant, and this is the insignificance of this rate shows how huge the Shoah devastated the Jewish population in Belgium. There were also gypsies who were detained in Dossin, but as in Birkenau, their fate is quite different because they must be kept apart from all other detainees or guards. They are not allowed to have any contact with other people, and their situation was quite more worse than those of the Jews in the camp. So I think, yes, after the liberation of Belgium, during some months, the building of the Dossin Barracks was used as a prison for supposed or actual collaborators. After their transfer to other prisons, the Belgian army recovered the barracks, which returns to its military function. In 1978, the army left the building because it was too old and not efficient enough. They went to a new modern installation in Petit. And so the building was falling into ruins. So the Flemish authorities of the city of Malines decided to destroy the building. But finally, this plan was not fulfilled, and finally they decided to transform the place in a luxury apartment complex. It was then during the 80s, and it's only until the late 80s that the Jewish community in Belgium understood the importance of the site and considered to create a deportation memorial there. Then began a struggle for the memory of the Dossin Barracks, and till now we are still struggling, fighting to make this place to bring the history of this place to the public, because it's still in the shadow of Braindonk. Thank you, and excuse me for my bad English, but I do not like to read my paper.